Thank you, Alana. So yes, I'm Melissa Merkel. I'm a curatorial assistant. Can you hear me a little better?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm a curatorial assistant at the MCZ. I work in both the Invertebrate Zoology and Mollusk departments. So I've had the opportunity to work on both the DigIn and ESB grants. And today I'm going to be talking about some of the digitization strategies and protocols that we've been using on these grants. So before delving into specifics, I want to look at some of our overall goals. So of course, we're always looking for ways to maximize both efficiency and accuracy. So of course, we want to digitize quickly since we have a specific time frame in which to catalog a huge number of records. But at the same time, we want to make those records as clean as possible so that they can be useful and helpful to researchers. Additionally, we want to have ways to clean and track our existing records and find ways to keep track of those as well as records that are being created. And then our end goal is to make our data publicly accessible, again, so that it can be useful to researchers. So here's a general overview of our process. So the first step is to find our uncatalogued material within the collection, decide what we want to catalog. Next, we're going to be extracting data from those labels. Then that data is uploaded to our database. And then we have the step of tracking our progress, keeping track of the numbers of specimens that we've been able to catalog. All right. So at each step in this process, there are certain challenges that we come upon. Additionally, the MCZ is a fairly large and historic collection, which means that there's a lot of variety in the material that we have in terms of its age, who it was collected by, the quality and the type of data that we have available for it. So as a result, we have a number of strategies in our digitization toolbox. And so at each step, I'll be talking about some of the challenges that we come across and which different strategies we use and how we're able to use different strategies in different cases to maximize our efficiency and accuracy. All right, so looking at our first step, finding the uncatalogued material, I'll start by talking about ESB. One of the greatest challenges was finding specimens that were collected along the Eastern Seaboard. So the mollusk department at the MCZ is organized taxonomically, not geographically. And there are many molluscan families that are cosmopolitan, which means that they can be found in multiple places around the world. So for example, the map that I've got here, these are specimens of the genus Laternella. So these are your common periwinkle seashells. So, and these are the ones that we have in our database so far. But as you can see from this distribution, while they are well represented along the Eastern Seaboard, they're also found in Europe as well. So we're trying to find ways to be more efficient in finding specimens that are distributed throughout our collection. In terms of both ESB and DigIn, also deciding, are we going to catalog wet specimens or dry specimens? They're housed in different parts of the collection, so actually in totally different buildings. So we're trying to minimize the time that we're spending going back and forth between collection spaces. Also thinking that often our workspaces are in a different area too than our collection. So here are some of the strategies that we have. So starting with ESB, we began by focusing on families that we knew for sure were marine. So maybe we were cosmopolitan, but all of them were going to be marine specimens. So I started by going through our collection of Smelidae and Pectinidae and finding all of the specimens that were found along the Eastern Seaboard, cataloging those first. We've also been looking for specimens and grouping them together by collector and expedition, specifically for collectors that we know only or mostly collected along the Eastern Seaboard. So my colleague, Michelle Tang, will be talking about cataloging bury specimens. I've been working on specimens collected by Walter P. Baranowski, who collected along the northeast coast of the US. And this has been helpful because it means that we're able to focus on a specific collector, get used to the types of localities that they have, their handwriting, and their station numbers. And then our next step is going to be looking for those stragglers, and we are going to have to go drawer by drawer, but hopefully we'll be able to use the help and have already started using the help of museum workers who may not have expertise specifically in malacology, but are able to extract a lot of the data from the labels for us and also help us find these specimens in our collection. All right, in terms of DigIn, we've decided to catalog class by class. So right now I'm working on Echinoidea specimens. And we've also decided, again, to catalog our wet specimens and dry specimens separately in order to minimize the time that it takes to move between those two collections. But by sticking with a certain class first, we're able to still focus on that taxonomy. All right, so our next step is capturing the data from the labels. So some of these challenges I'm sure you all are very familiar with. Maybe you have labels that are old and hard to decipher. Maybe they're missing some data, or maybe some of the data is incomplete and or messy. Additionally, I'll keep talking about finding efficient ways to move between like your workspace and your collection. So some of the strategies that we have for this are finding ways sometimes to catalog in the collection. So I've got a picture here of me on top of one of the compactors. I have a spreadsheet, so I'm able to just directly extract that data from the labels right there, so I don't have to go back and forth. Additionally, we have cabinets and carts that we're able to use as extended workspaces. So I've got a picture here of my cart with my sea urchins on it. And by having this, I'm able to catalog a bunch of the time, maybe only have to go into the collection maybe once a week. So in terms of dealing with those messy labels, we have a couple resources that we're able to use. One is by utilizing the records that we already have in MCZ base. So for example, here I've got this jar of sea urchins on the bottom right. So there's not a lot of data here, but what I was able to do is search MCZ base for other records that were collected by North 35 at that specific station number. I was fortunately able to find other specimens collected at that point, was able to fill in gaps in when the specimen was collected, also find more specific information about that station number in terms of coordinates. So that cuts down on time and helps me fill in those gaps. Additionally, in terms of messy data, so for this example, I'm looking at the sea urchins on the bottom left. You'll see the species or the genus name was listed as Stylifer. I found as I was working with a specimen that Stylifer is actually not a genus for sea urchins. It's actually a molluscan genus. But by using MCZ base and looking up the information they had about Stylifer, I was able to find that this is a type of mollusks that is known to parasitize pretty specific genus of sea urchins and is commonly found with them. And then I was able to make a pretty confident taxonomic identification. That's been a very helpful resource. All right, and our next up, uploading data into the database. So this is just a preview of our end goal. Once we have a record on our database, this is what researchers are going to be seeing in terms of like collector information, taxonomic information, geographic information. So this is kind of our end goal. So we have a couple different ways that we're able to upload information into our database. So the first is by cloning records. So this is really helpful whenever we're dealing with split lots or specimens with very similar data. So maybe specimens that are collected at the exact same station number on the exact same day, because it minimizes the number of keystrokes, because all you might have to change is catalog number, maybe specimen count. So that allows that process to happen very quickly. And then also records that you've cloned are immediately ready for bulk load. So it's a pretty quick process. Additionally, we have the option of a single data entry screen. So this allows you to either copy the previously entered record, or you can create an entirely blank record as well. So one of the nice things about this is it helps you check collector name for any misspellings, scientific names, etc., as you're entering in that information. So for example, here I've started typing in the scientific name Anandara transversa. As you can see, it started filling in the information for me. So this allows it to be fairly user-friendly and can go into the database fairly quickly. So it can, I find that this works well when you have like a handful of specimens or specimens, again, that are fairly similar. So the downsides of both of these is that they do require you to have internet connections. It's not something that you can do while you're in the collection. It does also require the people who are able to do this do have to have some level of expertise with either invertebrate zoology or malacology. So that brings us to our bulk load spreadsheet. So this is something that we use when we're working in the collection because it's a spreadsheet, so it doesn't need any kind of internet connection. And it can be filled out by students and collections ops as well, because we can go through later and fix anything that we need to do in terms of like researching collector names, taxonomic names. It also allows us to clone without user error. So I can, instead of cloning everything, I can pick and choose fields that I want to copy and paste. But because you do have to research for yourself, spellings for taxonomic names, collector names, accession numbers, it is best when you're cataloging many specimens at once. All right, and our last step is tracking progress. Some of our challenges are finding and grouping together records that are already in the database and those that are being created often by multiple people. And we also want to find ways that we can track which records have been cleaned. So our first way of doing this is by using name groups. So these are like digital collections of specimens relating to the grant. This allows us to group together any existing record that we feel falls within that grant. So here's what this looks like on our database. We've got a description of the grant, as well as a searchable list of all the records that we flagged as being part of this grant. So we have one for ESB as well. Next, we have grant attributes. So as we're cataloging records, we add this field, and this allows us to verify which records have been cleaned. So as they're being cataloged, the employee puts in a timestamp with it and their name so that we know who looked at the record and when. And then we can also add remarks to show how the record was vetted. So with this example, I said that it was cataloged, so they know that I was looking at the specimen in my hand as I was adding it, and that I paid attention to claim the locality. And this is searchable in our database and helpful, therefore, for researchers to make sure that they're working with clean data. All right, thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, just what software did you say you were utilizing for your collection management?
So we have, we're really fortunate, we have MCZ base.
I can be closer to the mic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we have MCZ base, and it's fairly similar to Arctos, but we're very fortunate that we have like a team of programmers that were able to kind of make it more like specific to us. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Oh, okay, go ahead, Alana.
So what do you think is and folks can use the mic for questions. What do you think is the best way to go about figuring out where in a drawer, when you're tracking through a drawer for uncatalogued material from the Eastern Seaboard, right? That's a very specific thing to be going through a drawer, being like, is it Massachusetts? Is it Rhode Island? Is it Florida? Is it whatever? Have you found tricks to make that better in looking through a drawer, going through drawer by drawer?
Yeah. So I try to first kind of scan, look to see if some of them obviously have labels, that are recent. Our labels are pretty standardized, so that makes it easy to see. Additionally, I try to kind of keep track of maybe a certain type of species or a genus that is pretty common along the Eastern Seaboard as well. And then also sometimes, not always, Florida, for example, has very different types of shells than what you might find in Massachusetts in some ways, but even sometimes like something that is brightly colored may be unlikely to be found along the Eastern Seaboard. But a lot of what we did going in was doing some research to see, based on records that we already have, what genuses are most likely within a certain family to show up on the Eastern Seaboard. And that kind of gives me a good place to know where I need to spend the bulk of my time. Yeah. Right, thank you.
So now you get to see me again, but I'll be here for a while this time. So again, my name is Alana Rivera. I'm at the MC